Welcome to Herbally Yours, an adventure into the world of natural medicine. Here is your host, Dr. Ellen Kamai, the natural nurse who will help you take the leap to ultimate wellness.
Greetings, and thank you for joining me, Ellen Kamai, the natural nurse, for another edition of Herbally Yours, right here on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. Herbally Yours brings you the latest information about the many facets in the world of natural living. Today, we are so happy to have on board as our guest, Dr. Mark Ratner. Dr. Mark Ratner is the Chief Science Officer at Prilosec, a health and wellness company founded by a team of physicians and scientists who are committed to developing evidence-based, independently certified nutritional supplements. And you can find out more at Prilosec.com. Thank you so much for joining us today, Dr. Ratner.
My pleasure, Ellen.
Now, you have a very interesting history going back in time, because even early on, you did have an additional degree in nutritional biochemistry, which is something I think should be included in mainstream medical school education.
Well, it's funny because I did my undergraduate work at Cornell, and Cornell, even back then, had a really world-renowned nutrition department. There was a professor there named T. Colin Campbell, who is probably one of the leading advocates of plant-based eating and has really kind of over the last 30 years been a major force in that whole realm. So after I finished my undergraduate years, I stuck around and did a master's degree program in nutritional biochemistry. And then I went to medical school for a number of years. After I finished medical school, I did my residency, and then I got into practice, and I kind of forgot about nutrition, for a number of years. I wasn't really focused on it at first. And then there was a ton of research being published about the impact of specific nutrients on prostate health and prostate cancer risk. And that sort of led me back to my nutrition education. And it ultimately led to us founding the company you mentioned, Prilosec, which has now been around for about 20 years. I'm the Chief Science Officer. And we take a very focused approach. We don't produce a huge number of products. And our products tend to be very kind of condition specific in those specialty fields that you mentioned. And so that's sort of my background. And I'd like to tell you that I was so forward thinking back 35 years ago that I realized how important nutrition would become, but it just at the time seemed like something interesting. And that's kind of how I ended up, kind of going down that road.
Well, great story. And I want to remind our listeners that you are listening to Herbally Yours on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm Ellen Kamai, the natural nurse, and my guest today is Dr. Mark Ratner, who is a medical doctor. And we're talking a lot about evidence-based nutrients. In addition, if you visit our archive, you'll be able to click on free ebooks and download them. And it's interesting, the topics of your ebooks, and I believe that Dr. Ratner, you actually had personal experiences in these areas. You have an ebook entitled Heartburn, Acid Reflux, and GERD, What You Need to Know. And boy, oh boy, there's a lot of people who take all kinds of over-the-counter antacids, etc. So I'm sure your book delves deeply into that.
This is an area that our company got into because of my own personal experience. I jokingly say that I am a prisoner of Prilosec. I'm sure many people are familiar with medication, Prilosec.
Because years ago it was prescription only, and then it became over the counter.
Exactly.
Right, but we don't want to mention brand names. So let's talk about it more like in its generic.
Well, the generic name is Omeprazole. Omeprazole is a medication that's called a PPI, which is a proton pump inhibitor. And it is for people who have chronic acid reflux, what we call GERD, gastroesophageal reflux disease, we're meaning you're having heartburn literally every day. It can be like a miracle drug. So about 20 years ago, I started taking Prilosec or Omeprazole, and it was like somebody had just waved a magic wand, snapped their fingers, and all of a sudden my symptoms just completely went away. And that's because those medications, the PPIs, like Omeprazole, they block production of stomach acid. But the problem is that once you start taking one of these PPIs, after a few months of being on it, good luck getting off it. What happens is your stomach acid production just shuts down completely. And then if you stop the medication, you get this rebound in stomach acid production where it's like 5 times more production of acid than it ever was in the past. And you just feel like you want to die. I mean, it is terrible. And so most people, once they've been taking a PPI chronically, it's nearly impossible to stop it. It's very, very challenging. And so what happened to me was after probably about, 15 years of taking this medication, I woke up in the middle of the night one night, 2:00 in the morning, with my heart pounding out of my chest. It was just clearly I had something very wrong going on. We went over to the emergency room. I was in atrial fibrillation, and they gave me some medication in the emergency room and stopped it. I got some blood work done, and they came back and they said to me that night, they said, "Your magnesium level's very low." The doctor took a look at the list of medications I was taking and said, "You know what? I think it's the Omeprazole. Okay, that can lower your magnesium level." And sure enough, ever since then, I've been supplementing magnesium, and knock wood, have never had a recurrence.
What an interesting story. One thing I want to point out, Dr. Ratner, is one of the many things that I teach is drug nutrient depletion. A lot
Absolutely.
of people have heard of herb drug interactions and supplement drug interactions. That's also important. But I think drug nutrient depletion should be a major talking point about every pharmaceutical because, like you're just pointing out, think about the fact that so many people would get less adverse effects from the medications if they have to take them. It's massive. In fact, the things called adverse effects to medications can often be linked to what you experienced, which is a lowering of essential nutrients because of taking the medication. And that seems to be very largely just not even addressed in mainstream medicine.
No, absolutely. I mean, and pharmacists try to sometimes share their knowledge about those things. But it really should be in the realm of your primary care physician, who kind of is in charge of overall looking at everything you're taking. And you're right. You're exactly right. It's
beyond that, I really truly believe, and I'm working towards in mainstream standard of practice, that every client or patient gets a full nutrient profile done as part of mainstream medicine every 2 years or so. Yeah, I mean, that's so inexpensive.
Oh, absolutely. If you look at the top 10 medications being taken by U.S. adults, I would say probably 2/3 of them are associated with the potential for significant nutrient depletion. Probably one of the best examples are statins. Atorvastatin, which used to be sold under the trade name of Lipitor, right, is the single most popular drug in the world. And yet it blocks production in our body of coenzyme Q10. The same enzyme, what statin drugs do is they block an enzyme in our body that produces cholesterol. And so they are extremely effective at lowering your cholesterol. And statins are generally well tolerated, although some people will get myalgias, muscle pain from them. But the key thing is that the same enzyme that makes cholesterol in our body produces coenzyme Q10, which is so important for energy production in our cells. And so when you take a statin, you're not only blocking cholesterol production, you're blocking coenzyme Q10 production. And so you should be supplementing coenzyme Q10 if you're on a statin chronically. And so, you can go down the list. There are many of these medication, drug-induced, as you put it, drug-induced nutrient depletions. The two that we focus on, that we have focused on at Theralogics, involve the PPIs, like Omeprazole, the acid-blocking medications, because they will block absorption from the stomach. Without stomach acid, you cannot absorb vitamin B12 from your diet, and you cannot absorb magnesium. Okay, so those two nutrients, B12 and magnesium, you are at risk for depletion and a deficiency if you're taking one of those acid blocking medications chronically. The other medication that we focus on is called Metformin. Metformin is a drug that's been around for about 50 years. It is it's the first line medication that's prescribed most frequently for type 2 diabetes. And it's very effective. It's a great medication for lowering blood sugar. There's even some data that's now being investigated by the NIH to suggest that metformin may be a longevity drug. It may actually reduce the risk of other illnesses like cancer and heart disease. And so there's a big clinical trial going on to look at that. But the problem that we are aware of is that metformin, which is usually taken, it's by prescription, it's taken every day, is going to reduce same two nutrients, your vitamin B12 level and your magnesium level. And so both of those nutrients are so critical for good health. B12 is absolutely vital for making red blood cells. And so if your B12 level is low, you can become anemic. Vitamin B12 is also important for function of our nerve endings. And so you can get a neuropathy if your B12 level is low. And so those are the key things for B12. Magnesium is very important for electrical conduction in the nerve system and in the heart, which is why I ended up with my little trip to the emergency room that night. And magnesium, if your magnesium level drops real low, you can get seizures, you can get all kinds of really serious health issues that can suddenly crop up. And so our drive here, our goal is to focus attention on these two medications, the class of medications called PPIs and metformin. And let me just say one thing for all your listeners. If you are on either of those types of medications, don't make a change on your own. This is something to definitely discuss with your doc. And there are ways, if you have to stay on these medications, there are ways to sort of avoid the pitfalls, to avoid these drug-induced nutrient depletions. You mentioned the two ebooks. We have ebooks available, and very simple. It's a free ebook. You can go and download either one or both. The URLs are ppihelp.org or metforminhelp.org. And you can just download the ebooks for free there. And the ebooks really talk not only about avoiding the issues that can be side effects from these medications, but also how you might be able to live without those medications by modifying diet and lifestyle.
And also, I will jump in here at this point, because that's why I have been doing herbal medicine and healthy eating really as a major focus of my practice since 1964. Yes, that is with a 6. And I think that's why myself and my parents who are in their 90s have never used a pharmaceutical drug of any kind and don't have all those long list of illnesses, like you said, that people get, first of all, by not practicing a healthy lifestyle. Of course, it could be genetics, but really there should be much more focus, in my opinion, of never using these pharmaceuticals unless really needed and as a last-ditch effort, because through changing your diet, your exercise, and for instance, metformin really has quite a lot of positive aspects, as you pointed out, Dr. Ratner. Another one, because I know you do OBGYN, is with polycystic ovarian. There's some very good studies looking at metformin, but I think why metformin is so useful is because it brings down effectively that blood sugar level. Yet metformin itself, as you point out, also could have ramifications in terms of decreasing nutrients such as B12 and magnesium and others, yet we can bring down that blood level with something like fenugreek. Fenugreek is almost as effective as metformin in bringing down that blood sugar level. And yet it has a vast array of additional positive effects without any of the nutrient depletion or other negative effects. So I think it should be first.
I'll tell you another fantastic nutrient intervention for PCOS are the inositols. Okay. Metformin functions as what we call an insulin sensitizer. Women with PCOS, individuals who have type 2 diabetes, they have elevated blood sugar levels, but they also have elevated blood insulin levels. Unlike type 1 diabetes, which is a failure of the pancreas to make insulin, in type 2 diabetes and in PCOS, individuals have what we call insulin resistance, which means their cells just don't respond properly to the insulin that's circulating in their bloodstream. What metformin does is it's an insulin sensitizer. It makes the cells more sensitive to insulin, but it does have the side effects that we talked about. Fenugreek and the inositols, myo-inositol, those are very effective insulin sensitizers. And in fact, there are now head-to-head studies with the inositols and metformin, which basically show that the inositols are every bit as good in terms of reducing hyperinsulinemia, excess insulin levels in the blood and blood sugar levels. And the only significant difference between metformin and inositol supplementation for PCOS is that women who take metformin have 5 times greater side effects, adverse events, because metformin's tough. I mean, if anybody who's ever taken metformin, it's very tough on the stomach. Something like 15% of people basically quit taking metformin very early because they just can't tolerate the GI upset. But yes, natural approaches for something like insulin resistance and improving insulin sensitivity, absolutely critical to look at that.
And I really think it should be mainstreamed at this point, because looking at natural remedies, we still need drugs, absolutely. We still need surgery, absolutely. It's just the prioritization, I believe, in medicine should be using that which is most effective with the least, let's say, adverse effect profile first. And then we could move along to, other serious medications which might be needed because somebody doesn't want to modify their diet at all, so they're not going to take those personal steps. Then, of course, we might need something like metformin and eventually surgery down the road. But it's so great that you are offering through Theralogics studied nutritional supplements that we know work and we know have a low incidence of adverse effects.
Yeah, we've got a very interesting company. Our products are formulated by a medical advisory board, which includes physicians and scientists from 11 different medical schools in 6 different areas of specialization, includes a bunch of full-time faculty people from Cornell Weill in the city. As a result of the fact that we have a fairly deliberative process for creating these products, we don't have a huge product line. Compared to a lot of other companies in this space, which might have hundreds of products in their catalog, we've only got about 35. And after 20 years, that's a reflection of the fact that we're very deliberative in how we approach product formulation. Our products are being used in about a half a dozen clinical trials around the country, funded by either universities or NIH grants. And so we try to take a fairly responsible and deliberative approach to creating these products. A perfect example is this issue of the B12 and magnesium depletion from these medications that we've been talking about. We wanted to create a product that would sort of address that issue. But the real problem in both of these medication questions is absorption. The reason you're getting into trouble to begin with is that these drugs are interfering with your body's ability to absorb these nutrients. And so if we were going to create a supplement, we needed to really focus in on the most bioavailable, the most highly absorbable forms of both B12 and magnesium. And so it took us a while, and really we had to kind of dig into the research that's been published over the years. And we ended up creating a product that's called RimClear, REMPLIR, which is it's actually the French word for restore or repletion. And that's really the goal, is to keep you from getting deficient in both magnesium and B12. Both of those, B12 and magnesium in RimClear, are highly absorbable. We have multiple forms of B12 that are available to us. We have multiple forms of magnesium that are available as a supplement, and we needed to find the best combination of absorption and GI tolerability. You know, magnesium can be, certain forms of magnesium, very irritating to the stomach. So, for instance, magnesium citrate in a solution form it's a laxative. And we certainly didn't want to create those issues. So we use what's called a chelated magnesium, which means it's bound to an amino acid. It's a
well, that's a very important point that you're bringing up there, Dr. Ratner, is that let's say someone listens to the show today and they go, oh, well, gee, I'm on both Metformin and Prilosec, which is not unusual, unfortunately. Right. And so therefore, you know, maybe the first thing you better do is go get your magnesium level measured. However, the blood magnesium level may not be enough. They should really also do a red blood cell magnesium to actually assess how much magnesium is in your system. But then what you said that's so important, Dr. Ratner, there's a big difference to running out. We're not going to talk about brands, but we're going to talk about forms, with taking something like a magnesium oxide or even a magnesium citrate with something that's in a magnesium chelate. You know, there's really a difference in absorption. So you're talking about, you know, a higher level of looking at these nutrients.
Yeah, exactly. It's absorption and it's tolerability, because, you know, you can produce the most brilliantly formulated product from an absorbability perspective, but if it creates all kinds of side effects when you take the medication, if it makes your stomach upset, if it gives you diarrhea, no one's going to want to stick with it. So finding that balance is always a challenge, and it's something that we focus heavily on.
Which is excellent. So you're researching things like, let's say, studies that have been done showing that these things can be effective, and then not only that, but looking at the best form in terms of perhaps absorption, absorbability, low incidence of adverse effects, all those things. So that is a really good way to go, looking at really what's going on in nutritional supplements. And of course, first thing is, you know, lifestyle of the person. Now, is there any kind of website or place that people could look up their medications? And I know there's lots online in terms of herb-drug interactions. Mm-hmm. Very often those are overhyped and they're theoretical. They've never been proven, but nonetheless, there are places you could look it up. Where would you suggest people can look in terms of drug nutrient depletions?
So if you go and do a Google search and you put in the phrase drug-induced nutrient depletion, you'll get on the first page of results, there'll be 3 or 4 really useful links. One is to a publication from the American Academy of Family Practice, which is it's sort of a PDF that you can download that lists probably about 20 different common medications, some more common than others, and the nutrient effects that they can have. There's also what's called the Linus Pauling Institute, which is at the University of Oregon, and is really one of the most responsible sources of information about dietary supplements. And they've got a great section on their website, the Linus Pauling Institute, about drug-induced nutrient depletion. And finally, there's a good article that was published about 3 years ago in a journal called The Pharmacist, which is a free publication. I think the article is available is for download online, which covers things like statins and blood pressure medications and benzodiazepines and, you know, all of these medications that are most commonly prescribed. again, we focused really on just B12 and magnesium, and that really brings us to the metformin and the PPIs. But this is a problem that exists in far too many medications. I mean, look, for years, people who have been put on thiazide diuretics for their blood pressure, and the thiazides, HCTZ, as most people call it, they've been around for literally 40 years or more. But doctors understood that. Doctors would say, hey, if you're going to be taking this medication, you can lower your potassium level because you're going to pee out. Excuse me for using that. I'm a urologist by training.
It's okay. I think we're allowed. We'll see if our illustrious engineer takes us off the air. I don't think so. It's okay.
That's a term of art for urologists. But in any event, you basically lose potassium in your urine if you take a thiazide diuretic. And so for years, doctors have told their patients who are taking a thiazide diuretic, eat a banana every day. Eat an extra banana every day. Because bananas are very rich in potassium, okay? So it's not like doctors are completely oblivious to this issue. They just haven't really been educated about how broadly it needs to be considered. And so, those are good resources for people who want to get more information about other medications that can potentially cause nutrient depletion.
So, Linus Pauling, I actually knew personally, because as I said, I've been doing this work for getting close to 60 years. Wow. And he was really, really a wonderful researcher.
Was he at Cornell? I'm trying to remember if he was at Cornell.
I didn't meet him at Cornell. I met him way after my Cornell years. And, he was at a conference. We were both lecturing there on nutrient depletions, as a matter of fact, so I'm not surprised. And in the older Merck manuals, which I have a large accumulation of, they used to always mention that, but they seem on the newer drug sheets, even when they're being introduced, they don't seem to put that information out. Yeah,
no, I mean, it's not in the consciousness of most family doctors, unfortunately. But you know what? Metformin had the FDA issued what's called a black box warning for physicians to check magnesium levels for individuals taking metformin for more than if you've been on it for more than 6 to 12 months. And most people, if they get on metformin, they're going to stay on it.
Yeah.
Unless they can lose lots of weight and start eating healthy and control their blood sugar sort of more naturally. Unfortunately, they're going to stay on metformin. And doctors are supposed to check magnesium levels, but how many of them are?
They're not, because it's not promoted, but that's why we do our radio show. And I want to thank you so much for being our guest today. Fascinating information. What is the best way for people to find you, Dr. Mark Ratner?
Theralogix.com. It's THERALOGIX.
Okay, well, thank you so much. And thank you, listeners, for tuning into Herbally Yours, produced in the studios of 90.3 WHPC, Nassau Community College, Garden City, New York. For further information, email us at whpc@ncc.edu. This is your host, Ellen Kamai at naturalnurse.com, inviting you to join us next week for another edition of Herbally Yours. Until then, stay healthy.